Well, hello everyone, Philosopher Stoner here. So I received an email from Anonomouse email, which is an interesting thing. I've never heard of that before. So it's a way to send someone an anonymous email. And so they're commenting on a couple of videos. There's a few paragraphs here. I'm going to talk to the camera. You can see the email on the screen. I'm going to read, and then I'm going to interject with my opinions, and I'm sort of going off the cuff here. I haven't rehearsed what I'm going to say. I read the email once, and I sort of thought about it a bit, but yeah, I'm not even really sure what I'll say, but we'll see how it goes. I'll read, and like I said, I'll interject. So, okay, dear sir, some comments about 2 videos I saw from you regarding the MGTOW, MGTOW, and marriage. Calling incels losers begs the question, especially since you praise celibacy in 1-hour video about Dillahunty's response to antinatalism. I didn't exactly praise it, in my opinion. That I was just sort of saying that if you're an antinatalist, that historically it would have made sense to be celibate, that you don't have to be celibate anymore, though, in the modern era, because we have access to, birth control technology, right? Condoms, spermicide, the morning after pill, abortion, lots of different things that we can control. That sex is no longer directly responsible for the act of procreation. It doesn't automatically happen anymore, at least unless you're really stupid. But historically, yes, that sex was, and that it automatically led to procreation, historically speaking, right? There was no way to get around it. It was just going to happen. But that's all changed, and that's all changed in the last 40 years. So we have a lot of cultural baggage that's sort of influencing people, right? Like Christian beliefs, right? That they got it correct in their era because they realized, well, sex before marriage, sex for the purposes that weren't for procreation, it was probably just going to be drama and a silly mess and cause a mess to clean up. So they figured, well, okay, let's just only have people have sex for procreation, keep the family unit together. It made sense in its era, made sense at the time. And yeah, there's a thread in Christianity that there's a celibate priest path, but it doesn't really work too well, right? Like the Catholic Church compels their priests to be celibate, and then what do? They go and molest children, you know? So I'm not anti-sex, people, as long as, like I said, as long as they're not having kids and they're wearing condoms and all that stuff, you don't have as much sex as you want. I'm not judging that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that, yeah, it's maybe logically inconsistent, though, because sex will probably lead to having kids. Like I said, it's just a historical thing that there's definitely a thread in the spiritual path of a lot of religions, right? Christianity, Buddhism, where if you want to do the right thing, yeah, you probably should be celibate. You should probably try to fight your desires and accept that the game is kind of broken in some way. And I don't really think calling incels losers begs the question. Incels, in my opinion, are guys that are blaming the whole feminism thing for the problem that they can't get laid. And it's a wuss, pussy, lame thing to say that if you can't get laid, it has something to do with you. That you might be, I've gone into this in some of my videos, the whole beta male problem, right? There's alphas, betas, there's vox days, sexual, socio, whatever hierarchy, and you got to do the whole self-improvement thing. You got to work on it. I despite being a beta male myself, and it's a spectrum, right? I've had girlfriends in the past. I have gotten laid, but due to my cognitive problem, the fact that I have high-functioning autism and Asperger's, I can't make a relationship work long-term. It's just not in the cards for me. That way, I can do short-term, can't do long-term. The women figure it out. I have like some minor alpha features. I'm tall, got a deep voice, I look okay, so they maybe think at first, oh, hey, this guy seems like he's a little bit alpha. Okay, I'll go for him. And then, like I said, after like 3 months, 6 months into it, they realize, oh, okay, this guy's a bit socially awkward. He's got some sort of cognitive problem. And then, bye-bye, William. That's what they say, right? So like I said, I don't think it's begging the question. I think, like I said, incels are, yeah, kind of losers, and you got to earn it, and you got to do the whole self-improvement thing, which is something I'm doing myself too, right? It's a spectrum. Um, I am more of a MGTOW in the sense that, yeah, that I'm not going with the whole traditional family unit framework anymore. I'm outside of that. And I do think historically, had I been born, say, like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, what would have happened with some guy like me with this whole high functioning autism thing is I would have been compelled by culture and society and whatever to become a priest or a monk or a friar or something like that. That probably would have happened. But due to what's happening in our culture, that didn't happen with me. But I did something fairly close, right? I majored in philosophy in university, and a lot of philosophers, what happened with them? Doing the whole rational thing, thinking thing. They made a personal choice. They didn't really have kids. Although they weren't antinatalists, they weren't getting it as much as I would have liked them to get it. They sort of realized, yeah, maybe I can do. There's plenty other things I can do other than having children. Right. Okay. So then he goes on to say here, I did not choose my crappy genetics and my small nuts, as Gary calls them, and wouldn't have. One is born unattractive. There is nothing I can do. You're 6'4", I'm not even 5'10". So what? It's a genetic lottery. Yeah, okay, but there's the whole thing, right, with the whole alpha, beta spectrum, right? There's guys that are not necessarily tall. They can be alpha males. I've met a couple of short guys that were closer to being an alpha male than I was. They had it's personality features. Lots of ugly guys. If you work on certain skills or whatever, you can get laid very easily. It's not all due to a genetic lottery, right? If you work on it, it's a skill like anything else. Like I said, my problem, I guess I never specifically specified. It's like I said, I can't do the long-term thing. It's a cognitive problem. And I also don't really want to go in the direction a lot of women want to go on, which is monogamy, having a traditional family, getting married. I don't want to get divorced and have to pay child support and alimony. There's plenty of other things I'd rather do with my life than do all that bullshit that I've seen it time after time in society and in my personal life at the whole traditional marriage thing doesn't work. So I'm more of a MGTOW. I'm not an incel. I'm not saying, oh, it's the fucking feminists. I can't get laid because of feminism and all the women are bitches these days and like, no, I'm sorry if you're saying that. You're kind of lame, kind of gay, If you're gay, it's no concern of mine where you want to stick your penis. I don't really give a shit as long as it's consenting. As long as you're not doing it to children. Hey, fine with me. Do whatever. Okay. So what? Genetic lottery. Okay, he goes on to say, but the point is that the only author so far who wrote intelligently about incels is Andy Nowinski. I'm probably not even fucking saying that right. He published a small book some time ago called A Final Solution to the Incel Problem. I've never heard of this guy. I might look it up and try and read it. Thanks for that. That's cool. He's a Catholic, which brings me to another point. Oh boy, here we go, a Catholic. Oh my goodness. Okay. MGTOWs always talk about self-improvement, but IQ is 80% hereditary. So what use is it, in case you aren't slaving away at some crappy job anyway, to self-improve when there really isn't much to improve? I'm a Christian and had a born-again experience more than 2 years ago. Okay, we'll get to that. But, the Buddhists even say something similar, right? That you gotta, it was even in the show I recently talked about, the Midnight Gospel. They get into Buddhism a bit. You got to acknowledge that all you're doing is kind of, leveling your character in a World of Warcraft kind of environment. And that, life is kind of futile and pointless in that sense. But, if you're unhappy, there's things you can do to be less unhappy. Although it'll kind of be like the princess with the 40 mattresses that still feels the pee. You're never going to be satisfied, but you can do things to, you make more money, not be poor. If you're fat, you can lose weight. There's certain things you can control, even if you have shitty genetics. And then, okay, you're a born-again Christian. Let's see where this is going. Before that, I was a suicidal antinatalist and atheist. I even hanged myself at the age of 23, 10 years ago. I never understood how some antinatalists like Tim Morbid Atheist, I haven't really watched him, and others, even Gary, could go on with their lives. I am not writing this to convince you of the Christian faith. After all, this came about by repenting. The Christian, as Luther wrote in his first thesis, lives his whole life under repentance. But the time when I repented, I did indeed experience a joy that I might have only had as a child. Even though I'm a Christian, I would like to see mentally ill people sterilized. While abortion can't be supported, eugenics can come from a Christian standpoint. Okay, so being a eugenicist, that's not really what antinatalism is about, right? It's not some people should breed and other people shouldn't breed. And what's your definition of what's retarded, right? Like, you want to be a religious Christian and you believe in God. I can sympathize, right? I've been to, plenty of funerals. This world that we're living in is very brutal, irrational, stupid. A lot of terrible things happening that I understand. You want some kind of a happily ever after here. And you need a Jesus or a Buddha or something like that. But, it's probably just your imaginary friend. You want it to be true and you believe it. You want it to be true because you're scared and it gives you comfort and it makes you feel good. That many of these religious people, even the devout ones, they believe in it because it makes them feel good, and it's a defense mechanism against the irrational world, brutal world that we're living in. And Ernest Becker sort of talks about it, right, where it's all about terror management theory. It's all about managing your death anxiety and trying to make sense of something that is very, it's a terrible thing. And most religious people, it's not even anything that, like, you may be an exception, but most religious people, it all has to do with cultural norms and traditional values kind of stuff, that they're not really thinking about it too hard one way or the other. They're thinking, well, my mom and dad did it, my neighbors are doing it, so I guess I got to do it. It's not a profound thought. It's not a thinking outside the box. They're not having deep spiritual insights or profound thoughts. It's, like I said, it's just conformity. It's not really questioning very hard anything. And it's, you want a God to be there, God to answer all your questions. And, God doesn't even really answer your questions, right? Like, okay, like the Big Bang, right, can be flawed because it's like saying, okay, something came from a nothing. Well, what happened before the nothing? Yeah, that's probably not Big Bang's probably not that satisfactory an answer, but God doesn't really solve your problem. Like, okay, God did it. Well, was there a nothing before God? What was God doing like billions of years before he created humans or whatever? Was he just sitting around, drinking a coffee or something? Like, it's you want it to be true. Just, it's like I said, it's people cling to this religious stuff because it stops critical thinking, and it's a defense mechanism against reality because, well, reality kind of sucks. That's basically my point. So I could argue that, okay, your definition of mentally ill people, you believe in an imaginary friend. Maybe you're mentally ill and you should be fucking sterilized. Like, but do we want to go down that dystopian road, though, doing that? Like, as an antinatalist, I'm all for policies that are, like disincentivizing procreation for a start, right? Like, we have child tax credits. We subsidize children through the tax system, paying for public education. We could get rid of things like that to disincentivize it, make people that want to do it pay for it. That sort of thing. Sterilizing people, well, maybe we're not ready to go there yet. Then Amentem's gone on about it ad nauseum, Gary, that really it's just getting the belligerent bottom 20% of our world population to stop being reckless and stupid, and the rest of it's going to happen sort of automatically, that the other 80% in the developed, civilized countries are not choosing to have children as much. They're having less than replacement level population, right? 2 kids, less than 2 kids. That if that demographic trend continues into the future, human race is going extinct. Right? They're just giving someone in a third world developing country high school education, they'll have less children. So there's no need for any of this, final solution Nazi stuff. It's just, like I said, it's just starting trends, right? And people doing the rational thinking thing, even though, like, I disagree with existentialists, nihilists, absurdists, and stuff, and I disagree with a guy like Albert Camus that said we must imagine Sisyphus pushing the boulder up and down repeatedly. We must imagine him happy. Well, it doesn't really matter that he doesn't agree with me entirely, that he wouldn't agree. Oh yeah, life is terrible. He wouldn't agree with me, but he gets enough of it right just by doing the whole thinking and skepticism thing and trying to determine what the truth is, that he made a personal choice in his life. Yeah, I'm not going to have kids. I'm just going to go smoke a cigarette, have a coffee, and chase a skirt, and you don't need 100% on this test to get even just a 60% score on the test. It's gonna all sort of fall into place, basically. Okay. Eugenics from a Christian standpoint. Okay, I already covered that. The thing is that I still hate my existence, but now I have to hope to drag through this life. Well, you need that, and that gets you through the day. Again, I sympathize, but it's wishful thinking. You want it to be true, and nothing I'm going to say is going to convince you that it's not true, because you want it to be true, because it's a defense mechanism, because you can't handle it. As an atheist, I could have lived, or rather, endured my existence only if I knew that I was a genius. Why else live? I'm not saying you should hang yourself either, but I never understood why I should drag through this life with an ugly and paining body too, not just mentally, also physically crappy. Well, like guys like Amendam Gary he would have quit long ago, but he thinks that the argument for antinatalism is an argument that can be won, right? It's the point that I've sort of already covered in political science. I took a first year university political science course, so nothing I'm saying here is all that profound. It's called critical mass. So if you get 5% of the population on board with something, you're going to get your speech at the podium. You're going to get your 15 minutes to talk about whatever the issue is, and you're going to get that time on the debate stage. You're going to get your shelf spot at the grocery store, and people can say, hey, do I want to buy this? Do I not want to buy it? That sort of thing. Like it happened with environmentalism over time. It became at least more than 5% of the population, and now environmentalism is influencing, at least rhetorically, a lot of policies and viewpoints. It's not the majority of the population, but still they get that, Greta Thunberg gets to have her time on the stage to talk about those issues. And that could happen with antinatalism, right? It's just a growing trend. So yeah, it's about being a soldier. It's about recognizing you're in a war and you got to fight the war. And hey, if you don't feel like fighting the war and you want to drop out, that's your prerogative. But he's just saying, well, if you're a crappy soldier, just don't get in my way, get out of the way, and don't naysay to people, oh, well, it's a battle that you can't win. Because it is an argument that can be won, potentially. And it's not optimism to say that. It's just, like I said, you can just look at already pre-existing trends and see that, yeah, it's the trend. That's the trend. Human race is going extinct if we get the bottom 20% under control. Okay. Regarding marriage, 70% is way too high, and I'm assuming he's referring to divorce rates. Anyways, as Vox Day once said, even though I found his dark stream about MGTOW going evil's one way over the top, and agree more with Andy Nowinski's critique, Vox Day swings and misses on MGTOW or so. He is correct that the numbers are skewed because divorces of the same individual are counted each time. I don't really give a shit. There's, statistics, there's lies, damn lies, and then statistics. I think that was Mark Twain that said that, I forget, but I don't really give a fuck. The trend seems to be that less and less people are not, it's harder to sell this fairy tale of a happily ever after, and that the traditional family unit is a sacred institution, that, there's plenty of married people, right? The husband is trying to cheat on his wife and fuck his neighbor's wife, and, all kinds of conniving and bullshit, and people are hypocrites, right? So it just depends what statistics you look at, but you can definitely see that, like, if people really believe this traditional stuff had value, they wouldn't be behaving the way that they're behaving, and it seems to be a growing trend. And I'm not some religious adherent of Vox Day either. I think the idea of the socio-sexual hierarchy is a valid idea. It's a useful thing, but nobody really gives a fuck if you're a gamma male or a delta male or a beta male or whatever the fuck. Nobody really cares. It's just a useful thing to look at how social structures are. Anyways, it's also not true that 40 was old. So I guess he's referring to in the past. Yeah, in the past, like the Middle Ages, 60 would have been old. You would have been an elder that would have been like really, really fucking old in the Middle Ages. It really just depends what time period you're talking about, right? Like in the ancient Romans, ancient Greeks, the elite people of that society did live to be in their 80s and stuff. But then they had slaves doing everything for them. They didn't do any real work. It was all slaves. And the life expectancy of the slaves was like, 20, 30 years, and that's it, Anyway, as blah, blah. Oh, no, wait, I frigged that up. Yeah, I was reading the same thing over again. See, like, my mind's all over the place these days. I frig stuff up. Yeah, I'm an idiot. Sorry. Yeah, yep, Philosopher's Stoner's an idiot there. But yeah, he was referring to the 70% being the divorce rate, and already covered that. Okay, yeah, 40 was old. Yeah, I was going on about that. See, I'm really confused. I'm really fucking tired. Haven't been sleeping good the past few days. I'm not going to redo this video. Fuck that. In the cities, people died earlier, but in rural areas, people lived into old age. Yeah, like I said, the elites of those societies did live to be old, but they had slaves doing everything for them. And those slaves, they probably lived to their 20s and 30s. In the Middle Ages, yeah, 60 would have been old, as I already said. Paintings, historical sources, and even the Bible is evidence enough of this. What the Bible isn't evidence of anything. What I think the Bible is, in my opinion, is I've gone on about it in some of my other videos about the whole Jordan Maxwell thing and astrotheology. So the Bible is an occult metaphor. It's hidden knowledge of talking about astrology. Right, where he goes into that, like a holiday like Christmas is significant because it's the rebirth of the sun. The days start getting longer, and that the story of Jesus closely resembles this resurrection story of the sun, right? Jesus is dead for 3 days, right? So starting on December 21st or 22nd, the sun in the sky is clinically dead, and then by December 25th, the sun rises, it is resurrected and returns to life, and the planets, the northern hemisphere returns to life. And there's this theme of, the northern hemisphere returning to the sun returning to the northern hemisphere, and the sun retreating from the northern hemisphere, giving us the seasons, giving us that duality theme of light versus dark. There's stories, right, like how Judas was bitten by a scorpion in the Bible. There's that story. And then what that has to do with is that when the sun starts to die in about, October, November, it enters the constellation Scorpio. Then by December, when the sun is clinically dead, it's in the constellation Capricorn. And Capricorn is where you get the horned god symbolism of the devil and all that. And anyways, there's lots of stories in it that he makes an argument, like a 2-hour fucking video where he goes into astrotheology. And I've talked about it in a few of my other videos. So there is some empirical basis in Christianity that's related to the paganism, that they converted the pagans and they sort of incorporated their mythology into the whole Jesus story. And the Jesus story also resembles the whole in ancient Egyptian mythology of Osiris, right? And the birth, the star Sirius, the dog star, and then what is God spelled backwards? Dog. And that, there's even in the Egyptian mythology, there's also a virgin birth, right? When the sun starts to die, it starts off in September, which is the Virgo. So it is born of a virgin, which means that this whole process of the sun dying and rebirth starts in September, born of a virgin. And there's all sorts of stories in ancient mythologies of this virgin birth, referring to this astrotheology concept that he gets into. So anyways, moving on. I had a website up once, but it took down after studying that the MPIAI, don't know what that is. As Vox Day says, most people are idiots. This goes for many commenters on Vox Day's blog. However, I still keep it around and uploaded it here because I outlined some views that I still subscribe to. Though it's a lot, but basically my views on the cynical view of the hierarchy, my critical view of sex and rejection of it in its entirety. I see myself as anti-sex, just like Andy Nowinski. Haven't changed. Neither has my longing for death, despite my Christian beliefs. Well, yeah, that's a problem that you maybe got to talk to your psychiatrist about. Like, and I see a psychiatrist. I got fucking problems, but if you want to believe in your religion, as I said before, it's a defense mechanism. Like, right, what Ernest Becker talks about your death anxiety, that your faith should be protecting you from those feelings of wanting to die. It should be getting you out of bed in the morning. It should be, praise Jesus, hallelujah, he makes me feel great. And I think that that's a sign that you don't really believe the bullshit that you're believing in. You just don't know where to go. You just don't know how to give yourself a meaning. You're just a bad soldier, and you don't want to argue the argument and fight the fight. That's just my opinion. And, I do subscribe to certain things like in Buddhism, right, meditation and stuff, and that stuff is palliative. It makes me feel better. That's what it's about. It's about making yourself feel better. It's about things here in this world have value, and there's good and bad states, and it's about feeling better. The life is kind of shitty, so you got to try to feel good if you're going to stay here, but, also try to make things better, make the world a better place, right? To go volunteer for, Mothers Against Drunk Driving or something. You can do good in the world. You can try to make the world a better place. Maybe it is futile, but, you'll feel better about it anyway. And yeah, like I said, I'm not strictly anti-sex, but it's again, I'm not interested in the whole having children thing. So traditionally, I would have had to been celibate and been like a monk or a priest or something. But like I said, because of birth control, don't have to worry about that. Blah, 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 despite my Christian beliefs. Okay, covered that. I cite some Kierkegaard who felt similarly and who was a Christian as well. In Encounters with Kierkegaard, we read that he had a kind of ceremony every morning that lasted between 30 to 60 minutes. Here's the page. I haven't looked at this page. But yeah, Kierkegaard said a lot of really true stuff. And just like early Christianity and Buddhism and a bunch of other religions, those people in those eras had a limited scientific understanding of the world. They didn't know the full picture. They didn't understand evolution, all that. So they were playing a game that they recognized, like the Buddhists were onto something, and same with the Christians, right? That this world that we're living in is kind of a meat grinder. There's a lot of suffering, all is dust and all is vanity and chasing the wind. They were onto these depressing ideas that this game wasn't Disneyland, right? They understood that, but they had no choice but to accept it. And I'm saying in our era, it's a different thing. Like I said, birth control technology, we have nuclear weapons. If we wanted to end this game here, we could blow the whole thing up tomorrow if it was a collective effort to do it. We could put nukes, drill a hole into the center of the earth and just blow the whole fucking thing up, right? We don't have to be the stoicism of just finding ways to accept it and say, yes, we give this a pass. There's a certain point where you don't sup with Hitler, right? You don't go along with it. We can do things differently now. We have more awareness now. Things have changed. Anyway, so quick summation. I had not become a Christian. Suicide would have been the answer. Well, why is suicide the answer? Like Amendum's talked about it ad nauseum, that you can kill yourself, but you'll be dead. Your consciousness, the say I kill myself, right? Philosopher stoner, that consciousness, that perception will be dead. But I'm going to wake up tomorrow in Bangladesh or something. I'll be a different person. My name will be, Bob or Susie or, whatever. But they'll have a similar perspective to me. There'll be a consciousness, and they're going to be playing the same game and come to the same rude realizations if we don't stop it. It'll just keep happening over and over and over again. It's been going on for 4 billion years. And right, the Buddhists were also onto something in that you perceive yourself as a separate consciousness from everything else when really it's all one consciousness. All the consciousnesses are the same, right? Me getting a pencil shoved in my eye sucks for me, but I can also realize that if I stuck a pencil in your eye, that would suck for you too. We all sort of feel a very similar experience here. There's the little differences, right? Like our quirks, right? Like we have a meal plate, right? And we like our meat and potatoes on one side of the plate, and we know our favorite color is different and stupid little bullshit, but the fundamental conscious experience is the same, right? So you killing yourself doesn't solve the problem. That gets you out. But the game continues and consciousness continues, and it keeps happening over and over and over again until we put a stop to it, until we just end it all for good, finally, right, as a collective effort, right, to stop the problem. So that just, like I said, that just means like you and, myself as well too, we're just bad soldiers. We're not fighting the fight good enough to end the war. It's a kind of war, right? So a troop dies, but the war is still going on, that sort of thing. I can relate to being 30 but feeling 80. Yeah, I still feel like that. I feel depressed and all that sort of stuff. I feel the same. Interestingly, the last journal entry Kierkegaard wrote was about exactly this, that the meaning of life is to be carried to the utmost life weariness, the tedium vitae. The entry is available on Anthony Storm's Rest RIP site, The Life's Destiny in Christian Eyes. With regards, anonymously ugly, mentally ill hunchback. I'm sorry if you're a hunchback, and I'm sorry that you feel like shit, and that all kind of sucks. No, the meaning of life is not to suffer. It's none of that. The meaning of life, I've gone over it before, and Amendum's gone over it before, and a few others have gone over it before, is that life is a value equation, right? As I just mentioned, right? There's a chasm of difference between eating a cupcake and having a pencil shoved in your eye, right? So there's this experience of good sensation, bad sensation, good and bad, positive and negative, but really there's no positive, there's just less negative. That's a whole separate argument, but life is a value equation. It's a negative value equation. It's basically negative utilitarianism, but to recognize like the existentialists and stuff and the absurdists and nihilists will say, well, there's no meaning. Okay, no, there is a meaning. The meaning is, say, your house is burning down. In the present continuous, your house is burning down. It's a meaningful event for you. Maybe it's not for me being 1,000 miles away, but for you, in that present moment, yeah, your fucking house is burning down. So it's important to you, and it's important in the immediate here and now.